So today we'll be talking about it's a day three, but it's sort of like the lecture is day three, but it's a part time, so things are a little bit different. We'll be talking about advanced CSS. We'll be talking about FlexBox. We'll talk about responsive web design. So these will be some of the topics that we'll cover today. You already learned how to style a website with CSS, but you might not have you don't have the power of Flexbox, so it's always difficult when you're doing things manually. So when you have technologies like Flexbox and you make a responsive web design and you learn how to do responsive web design, things become easy and you could align things easy on the page. You will learn techniques of how to do this today. So let's get started. The first thing I will start with is just go through some of the advanced CSS that you might not have learned before. So some of the advanced CSS are child selectors. You've heard about child selectors. Child selectors in CSS is basically if you want to select a child element. So you have a parent element and then you have a child element. So if you want to select, for example, you have a div and you want to select a paragraph within that div. So if we look into this example in W3 schools, and I can share if you guys want, you could see here in the HTML that you have a div, which is a parent. So the div is a parent, and then the paragraph is a child. So if you want to select if you want to select the paragraph, you could say, okay, let's go and select the div first, just like that right here. So let me give that space, and then you say okay, and then you give it that greater than sign, which means this child, the paragraph, is a direct child of div. So it's not a descendant; it's a direct child of div. And then you could give it the properties of the CSS. So that's what we mean by when we go back here, when we say I was gonna give you guys a slideshow, but I think it's better that we just go through the way I'm doing it, because I did it with the other team, the full-time team, and it was much better this way. So that's why we say child selector, is because this H2 is a child selector of this element. So that's how we select child elements, and you use that greater than sign. Sometimes you could select without the greater than sign. So if you go to here and you don't declare that greater than sign, CSS would assume that P is the child of div. So it's the same thing, but what it will do is it will select all the P's that's underneath that. So it selected here a P here. So if you wanna go exactly the first one, then you use the greater than sign. So those, you learned those before, kind of practiced a little bit, but you haven't really grasped it, what it is. So these are called child selectors when you selecting something in CSS. There's also something called pseudo classes. Pseudo classes are classes that they have different types. So one of the types are called dynamic pseudo classes. So if I zoom in a little bit, dynamic pseudo classes are pseudo classes that don't happen in the CSS unless you interact with it. So for example, there is two types of dynamic pseudo classes. There is the link, and then there is user action. So the link has two properties. So as you can see here, the link, you could use the link property, or you could use the visited property. So let's see what that is and how that looks like. So if we go over here, and let me just zoom out for a second so I can see. Let's see, we go to the link. I'm scrolling because I want to see that exact. Um, so let's see. So let's say link, CSS link. So link has a property of a couple of properties. So as you can see here, this is one of the property is linked. The other property is visited. So the first one is normal link that's not visited. So if you want to declare it, you will say a, and then the columns, and then you say link. So this is basically when the link is not touched. So if you didn't touch the link and you didn't visit it or clicked it, that's the property that you will give. and then you could define what it looks like. So you could either say red, blue, whatever, before the link is clicked. So this is called user action, user interaction, because you click in it. You could also change the color of the link if the link was visited. So this is how you change the color. So when the person clicks the link, you could change the color so that later when they come back, they could see, oh, this link was already clicked. So you will see in the website always that when you click a link and you go back, it's a different color than the other links, the links that you didn't click. So for example, Google uses it a lot, so that if you're searching something, you'll see that if you already visited a website, it will show that you already visited that website. So if we try this example and we see a real life example, so right now these are all commented. So we have a link, and the link has a couple of properties. You could hover over it. So there's a hover property, which is right here. So this hover property is also user action. So when you hover over it, it changes the color. So you hover over it, it changes to hot pink right there. You could change it to whatever you want here. We say something like dark blue or something like that. And if we run and we hover over it, it changes to dark blue. So hovering over it is an action, and this is a pseudo class. So these are called pseudo class. Hover, visited is when you click it. So I don't know where it's gonna take me now. Let me see. Probably it's gonna open a new tab. So when we click that, the main thing is that when we click it and we refresh it, it should have a different it could not have, like, sometimes it has the different color, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on where you're at. So right now we're in a sandbox area. So this is W3 Schools. It's not like an actual website. This is a editor that's within their website, so things might not be exactly the way you want it. So when we say visited, it changes to green. Before it's visited, it's red, and this is how you define that. So, and you could also say active. So if the link is active, that means if this is the link that you're actually in, and let's say you're actually browsing and it's in the URL, then that's where this color changes. So those are the properties of link. There's also properties of user action, which we just looked at, which is hover, active. There's also another property called focus, which is a pseudo class property in CSS, which is used mostly in the forms. So we'll actually go deep into forms and things like that. So today we'll cover how to style form. So we will see the focus property, which is a pseudo class. That means when you click a form, that means you're focused. Your mouse or your browser is focused in that area. So, and when you click out of it, it means it's not focused. So as you can see here, they give us a example of a form. We will get to that in a minute, and we'll kind of like figure out how that's used in example. But now we're just talking about the different pseudo classes. There's also another pseudo class which is used when you're trying to select something. So let's say we have a list. So actually, let me just give you an example of how this looks like. So let's say W3 Schools. So this is usually used in a list. So if you have a list of things, then you could use the first child. So the first child is a pseudo class that allows you to target elements that is the first child of another element. So if you have a list, you could select the first one in CSS without adding it into programming or without adding it into an HTML. You could select the first element and you could style it the way you want. So if you have seen, for example, like in other places, you see a table. On the table, the first line of the table has a different background than the rest of the table. This is what they usually use, is the first child. So you select the element, let's say LI, and then you say first child, and just the first child. You don't have to add anything to it. First dash child, and the browser will understand what you're trying to do. So let's try a list here. So we have a list here. So as you can see here, we have ordered, unordered list. We have ordered list. And the first one is coffee, and we selected it. So the background yellow. So as you can see here in the CSS, it's very basic. It just you say li, which is this list, so any of these elements, and then you say, okay, give it a pseudo class of first child. If we say here last child, I mean, it's self-explanatory. I was gonna ask you guys what that does. So it selects the last one basically. So, and there's different properties that we actually explained here. So there's the nth child, which you can choose to see if you want to select an even or an odd number of elements. So if you do this, let's say we do the nth child and then 2n. 2n means it's an even. Every even uh, element will be selected. So if we go here, we copy this, just right click copy, and we go here and we just put it like that. Let's just paste it. So let's see. So as you can see, it chooses the even, and right now we have a list of like 3. So if we actually add more here, let's add. So we have like 4. Let's add maybe like that amount and run. As you can see here, it selected the 2nd, the 4th, and the 6th. So it selects the even list. So if you have seen a table where they have like the first line is a different color, the second line is another color, and then it goes back and forth. That means this is how they do it. And if you do -1, what do you guys think is going to happen if we do -1? Anyone who can guess? What is it going to do? What is it going to select if we say -1?
First, third, fifth.
Odd numbers.
Okay, let's try that. So the odd numbers. So it selected the odd number of lists. So 1, 3, 5. So it selects the odd numbers. So this is how you select the odd numbers, and this is how you select the even number of elements. So those are some of the main pseudo classes that we will cover. So just keep those in a note, or it's in here. So just have it as a reference. So the first child and also these pseudo classes: link, visited, hover, and focus. Those are very important elements. I mean pseudo classes. So if we move on from this, and there is few of them, as you can see here. I am passing over. There's a before and after. This will come sometimes, but it's the reason I'm skipping it is because it's not the most. You will not see it everywhere. So, but read about it and understand how it works. Just look through the code. So we will go to forms, inshallah. So right now we'll just skip to forms because we have a lot to cover today. So let's see how we can style a form. So here in W3 schools, as you can see here, forms are the most important elements, the most important aspect of web design. Forms were actually the first things that were proposed when HTML and the browsers were coming together in like 1993. The first thing that was proposed and people said we need was forms. So forms were with HTML from the beginning. And they are very important because it helps your website become dynamic. It helps your users and your people who visit your website to communicate with you. They're also a pain at the same time. So for web developers, forms are the most pain you will see, and the most pain you will experience when you're developing something, especially a complex application. You want to keep in mind that hackers and people who want to hack websites, their best friend is forms. And the reason for that is they could send anything to the database. So that, I mean, if you have a form that sends anything you write to the database, that means you have ability. If you put something together, you have a opportunity to actually disturb the database. And that's how a lot of databases actually hacked, is by having a form like this, and it's connected to your database, and it's not properly set up, and it's not properly they say sanitized. You will actually experience that too. Personally, I have seen. I was building a website where it was hacked, and it was owned by a client. So the person who hacked used the form on the website, and from there on, I recommended either no forms, or if you submit the form, you should send it only to the email, not to the database. So that's how difficult forms are. So, but that's not what we're here for today. We're here just for styling and making it look nice. So let's actually try it out. So how do you style forms? So forms, first of all, let's actually learn how do we build forms actually. So how do we actually build a form? So now we don't have anything here in our HTML. Actually, let's just get rid of all this. Maybe let's keep that div because it's giving us this nice thing background. How do you build form? So in HTML, you start with the form name. So just like that, you just say form and then you close it with the form like that. So a lot of times this is how it starts, but when you go in a little bit more advanced, you will add more stuff here. But now we're just keeping it simple. So forms, they have two things. They have a label and they have an input or a select. So they have, if every input has to have a selection. It has to have a label. I mean, not selection. So we will start with label. I think that's how you spell it, label. And then we'll say something like first name, and then we'll say label. So this label needs another something else, something to. So this is just saying, okay, there's first name here. Okay, what is the first name? How do you input the first name? You say input, and then you say type. So the only thing that's required for input is type. Type means you have to tell the browser exactly what type of input is this. Is it a text? Is it a number? Is it a password? So you say there's a text, there's password, and there's a number. So and we'll see how those all look like. So let's first say text, and let's render this. As you can see, nice. I mean, we already have the CSS here set up for us, so it looks nice. But if we get rid of the CSS and see how it originally looks like, let's just copy the CSS so we don't lose it. That's how it should look like. So originally, forms are inline. So forms are inline, so they fit in the same line as the text, and the labels are also inline, so they fit nicely together. But we don't want that. A lot of times, you want the first name to come at the top, not here. You want first name to be within here. There's also something called placeholder. Placeholder is a text where you can tell people, okay, what this form should be. So you could say name or something like that, and you could actually make it nice if you want, like that. And then it will say name. And when the person clicks, that's not actual text. So when they type, it just goes away. So that's a placeholder. Another thing, there's a lot of things you could do with this, but those are, some of the most important things for the form. If you have a placeholder that says, let's say, first name, then you usually don't need a first name here as a label, because it says here and it's redundant. Like you have first name, your first name, so you could get rid of the label if you want. So it's good to have a label. There's also another input. So let's create another input. Let's actually create a label, and let's say this one, password. My phone is buzzing. Let's say password, and let's create an input and say type password. So this will make it so that when we have this, it's going to make it so that we have dots. Instead of text, we have dots. So that's how the forms you see that have password and it's just a dots. That's how you make them. You just say type password. There's also, if the form doesn't have a button, it will not work. So how do you submit a form with no button? So there's two ways to make a button. You could just say button and then say submit and then say here button. That's one way to make it. So that's one way. Another way to make a button is by creating an input. And saying type submit. So you have to say submit. You have to write it like that because then the input knows that this is a button. instead of text or something like that. And then you would just say value is equal to submit, and that value is what's going to show in the button, and it's exactly the same. We could just say something else here, send, and it will change that. So so you could create a button like that. So those are the main things about a form. You could add a selection. So right now, the one we just looked at, it has selection right here, and I can show you how that looks like. So let's just actually go back to the original way it was. So if we go down, as you can see here, so in W2 schools, they added so many things. So let me explain a little bit what those are. So here, there is action in the form. This action is where you submit this form. So if you fill out the form and you submit it, this is where you send it to. You send it to this page, action page.php. A lot of times you need a back in the language to handle the form. So, and we'll get to that in another lessons. But here on label, you have for, and then you have some name. We learned label, but we haven't seen this for thing. What is this for? So for is basically, it's used usually for devices, screen reader devices. The reason for that is if a screen reader comes to your website, it doesn't know what this label is for. So it just knows this is a label. It says first name, but there's input right next to it. I'm not sure if it's connected. So to make it so that this input is connected to this label, you just say for, and then you give it ID to the input that says the same thing. So you could just name whatever you want here. You could just say name, but to just make it different, they say first name, F name. So so that's what for is, if you ever see that. Anything else? So the selection here. So we have selection. So the select, it has a different way of doing it. So you say select, and this ID thing is for the for. So you could ignore it if you want. You could just do that. Also, in a lot of times when you're doing actual production application, you need to have a name for every input. So right here we have a name, and the name has to be unique. The reason for that is in the back end, it needs to know what this form is doing. So where it needs to know where what it's gonna take this form. So you give it a name, and this name is gonna be matched in the database. So it will say, okay, so this is a name, and this is the name in the name in the database. So this is the one of the columns or one of the inputs in the database. So it says, okay, whatever you put here, put it in the database that it's called the field in the database that's called last name. So that's a little more into the other lessons that we'll get into, but always name is important. So select has a name, and also you have options. So if you want to create the select like this, you just create select, and then you give it right underneath it between the select a closing tag and the opening tag of select, and you just type it like that, select. That's not something that we made up. That's the HTML. And then you give it an option. So these options are all the options that you have. So these are the options that you have. So these options need to have a value. So each option needs to have a value. And this value is what you're going to put in the database. So this is what the database is going to see. And then you have to give it a friendly name, which people can see. And then you close it with the option tag. So you could add as many options as you want here, and it will be fine. So you can see here, we have a lot of options here. But the value has to be all different. So that's the only thing. So that's mainly form. Let's get into the CSS of the form. So how do you style a form? So you style a form. Let me just copy the CSS so we're not confused, and let's just clear it up so we can start from the scratch. And if we run this, now there's nothing here. So if we want to style, let's say we want to style one of the inputs. So the first input we want to style. So inputs, if you want to style in CSS an input, you target the type. So you target the type. So we say input, and then we give it this square brackets, and then we say type is equal to text. So now this CSS will affect every input that has a type of text. So if you have multiple inputs that have a type of text, it will impact that. So now if we say something like padding 30 pixels, and we say like that, so you see it affect that. So that's how you select a input. You could also select the password here. You could select numbers here. So we haven't seen a number, but you could also add input a number, and it will only accept a number instead of text. So that's how you select it. So text. So now if we go back, let me just grab a couple of example of these. So let's just do that, and let's put it here. So now we're basically saying make the width 100%, and we're saying give it a pattern of this, give it a margin of this, and box sizing. And we'll cover box sizing in a little bit when we get to the responsive part of this lesson. But it basically took every input that is a text, and it gave this CSS. So now it looks like they cover the whole page and they're responsive to at the same time. So that's how you select. Another thing you could do is you could select the focus, and we actually talked about this in the pseudo class when we were talking about the CSS pseudo classes. You could say here focus. Focus means when you click it, what's going to happen. Now if we just run it, it will go back to the same thing. But if we click it, all these will apply. So now if we just click that, see, and if we click out, it's not applied. If we click it, applied. So that's what focus does. It's just basically if you want to change the properties when the form is clicked. Let's see if we want to cover something else here. So you could just play around with the borders, things like that, if you want. As you can see here, we covered these. So these are some of the ways that you could select an input. Let me just share this so that everybody has an access to it. So, and you could use the CSS that you have learned to change the input and how it looks like, how big it is, how small it is, the width, all that stuff. You could change it. You could add a border radius and border color. So right now, let's just remove the focus and let's add some border radius and border color and run it. As you can see, it looks nice. And now when you focus it, the color changes, and that there's a way to remove that, but we'll cover that in another lessons when we reach the responsive. It's much better that way. So yeah, you could do so many things with form, but the main thing is that this is the selection is just a little bit different than other things. When you select, another thing you could do is you could select the multiple things. So right here you could say comma, and then you could say input, and then you say just same way you selected as the other one, square brackets, and then you say type, and then you say something like password. So if you want to have multiple selections, you could select that. You could you could have a child selector. So a child selector would be something like, if you have, let's say, this select, and the option is child selector, so you could do that too. You could have a form and then have a child selector as a label or as an input. So there's so many ways to select it, but this is the most famous way, and the way most people use it. So we'll just keep it at that. We'll not complicate it. So that's pretty much it for the form and the styling. Do you guys have any question about the forms and how to style them? Any questions? Okay. Yeah, so we will move on to the next lesson, which is there is also CSS animation, which we will not cover today. CSS animation is really nice. It's good to have. Is a nice thing to understand how it works. But just to be honest, in reality, CSS animation is not used in most websites. It's the use of it. It's very minimum. So that's why we're not covering like the advanced way, but you could read it up. That's why I put it in here. It's something that, to keep in mind, that it comes up sometimes. So it's good to know how CSS animation is is created, there's something called at keyframes in CSS. And if you have any experience with animation of like animation softwares, you will hear a lot about the keyframes. So the keyframe is basically where this box is at. So if it's in this one position, make the color one way. If it's in different position, make the color another way. So and then the keyframe will help it so that it moves to different places. So that's just in a nutshell animation, CSS animation. So the next big thing we will cover will be FlexBox, but let me see why we use brackets for the input type. Okay, so that's a good question. Why do we use brackets for input type? The main thing would be just the way CSS was set up. So the only thing is that forms are just a little bit different when it comes to CSS and just HTML2. Forms are just a little bit unique, so they just wanted to make sure that it's something that is different, and when you look at it, it just looks different because it's a form. So there is no actual reason mainly that was we use this. The only reason is that we want to make sure you could actually just say just an input like that. You don't have to put the brackets, the you don't have to put the square brackets, but this will select almost any input that's on the website. So it will just go to every input that you have, even the submit button, and it will select that. So as you can see, it went to every input. So you just want to make it so it's more precise, and that's mainly something that you will learn in programming a lot, that you want to target something precisely. So that's the main reason that it's used. But why it was created that way, it's just the way CSS was created. Yeah, but the reason is just to select something specific. Any other question you guys have before we take a break and move on to FlexBox? Any question about forms, how to style them, things like that? Okay, I'll give it a second. All right, so we'll take a break. I know it's a short. We did like 30 minutes, but FlexBox is a beast. So we don't want to get thirsty. So we'll take 10-minute break, come back, and then tackle this beast of FlexBox. So I'll see you guys in a minute. 10 minutes. So see you soon. Okay, let's come back. Um, let's get back to it. All right. So go ahead and answer that question as much as you can. What is FlexBox? You could reply to the mic, or you could also just type it there if you want. What is FlexBox? I think some people here already used FlexBox, so just go ahead and describe the best way you think what it is. If you never heard of it, you could just say I don't know what it is, or you could just guess what it is. If you could guess it too, it's fine to guess. What is FlexBox? Okay, that's good. It's a CSS way to arrange elements on a web. Okay, that's good. Anyone else want to take a guess, or want to say what it is, or what they heard about it? I think I talked about a little bit yesterday, but go ahead. What do you think? It's new to you. Okay, that's good. That's fair. That's good. It's good to be honest. Mashallah. So good, inshallah. That's good. That's why you're here today. We'll cover it, and you by the end of this lesson, you will know what it is. Maybe positioning. That's good. That's good reply. Okay, mashallah. All right, great, inshallah. Great answers. Thank you guys for participating. Everyone who participated. So let's cover what FlexBox is. So let's go to here in the lesson. So let's go back and rethink of what we did before. So the last lesson, so we went over how to lay out things. I asked you guys to put the logo and the navigation next to each other. It was hard for you guys to do that. It's hard to find out the percentage. It's hard to find out if it's display inline, display block. What is that? It was hard for you guys to like align things. For example, one of the lesson was you guys have to follow a design that I put there, and it has like two texts next to each other. So all those is stuff that you arrange. It's usually difficult in CSS, and it's normal that you struggled with it. That's a normal thing. And at the beginning of CSS, it was painful, and it was a lot of people were struggling with it. People were looking for better solutions. So now we're in 2021. Flexbox came out around, I think, 2013. We have a solution for that. So solution for the layout. So flex, what do you guys think of the word flex? So it kind of came from flexible, right? Flexible. And the box is, everything that's a box, either a text or a element or whatever, a box. So the actual name of Flexbox is like a marketing name. People just use it. But the actual name of Flexbox is CSS Flexible Box Layout Module. It's a very long name and not good to say all the time. So it's a layout module for CSS. So Flexbox is native to CSS. So this is not something that we're gonna grab from somewhere. It's not like a plugin or something like that. It's part of CSS, and it's designed so that it helps you lay out whatever you have, either at the website or boxes or text or pictures. If you want to have a lot of pictures next to each other, you use Flexbox. So Flexbox is a way to kind of like lay out or have a nice layout of your website. So there's this website called CSS Tricks. It has one of the best resources for Flexbox. This is where people go when they want to understand Flexbox, and also me too when I forget something about Flexbox. Let's say the inner working of Flexbox and things like that, and how some of the elements actually work. I go back to here. So I'll share this link. I'll say bookmark it. Is do not forget this place, complete guide for FlexBox. So so this is what FlexBox is. It's a layout. So now when you have a layout, let's say you have multiple things. Let's say you have a 3 images and you want the 3 images to be next to each other. You have to create a container of those 3 images. You have to create a div of them, and then you have to give a class to that div and say something like container, and then within them, with each image, you have to give it a item name. You have to say, okay, a class name of item or something like that. And then if you take the container, the div container, and you give it a display of flex. So all you have to just do is display flex. Instead of where we were saying display inline, display block, you say display flex. And this flex will enable a lot of properties. So it will allow you to do a lot of things. The first thing you will do is it will just lay things out. So that is one of the things that's very powerful about FlexBox, is that the minute you apply display flex, it will just like completely lay things out for you without you even doing any extra work. So let's see an example of FlexBox in the wild, actually. So I can show you how it actually makes it so that you just add flex display flex, and it just completely changes the way that's the boxes are laid out. Can you share this page on a Slack channel? Oh, I shared the CSS tricks. I shared it, and also I can share this one, the W3 schools. So, oh, sorry, I shared it in the part time. If you're not in the part time, that's fine. I'll share it here, and the CSS tricks, I'll share it in here too. All right. So if we go here as example, so W3 schools gave us these boxes. So from last lesson, if you wanted to align all these boxes, it would have been really difficult. Like if I asked you to do all these, align them properly and give them a proper space and proper padding, all that stuff, it would have been difficult. So now let's see without FlexBox. Let's just remove this and just do that. So now you have this. So this is how it looks like. If you want to change something, you have to do something like you have to apply this. You have to say width 100%, and then you have to apply these elements with a display inline. That's how you usually do it. But without doing all that stuff, without even having this flex wrap, if we do that, this is normal block. So when it's like this, it means this is just a block. So each one of them is taking a space, and each one of them is a div. So let's just make them short. Each one of them is a div, and from our last lesson, divs take all the space, so they're block. So now they take in all the space here. But if you just go here and just say display flex, that's it, and say run, it will just automatically align everything properly for you without adding any percentage, without adding any inline block, all that stuff. You just say display flex, and if you want things to be right next to each other, that's it. You just take the container, which is the parent. So these are the children, as you can see, and we covered this many times. So this is the children, and this is the parent, and the parent is the higher container, is the higher element. So you give it a class of container. You don't even have to say flex container. You could just say container, and here you have to change the CSS. So now it just automatically changes that, and it's also responsive. So as you can see, it's responsive, but it's also missing a couple of things. It's missing something called flex wrap, which is a way to let's just go here, container. It's missing flex wrap, which allows you to let's say wrap. So if the boxes don't fit here and there's not enough space, you want the last box to go to the next line, and just kind of fill out the bottom ones if there's no space. So for that reason, you have FlexWrap right here. So FlexWrap is really nice because you just say FlexWrap and then you say wrap, then it will just move things to the next line. So you say FlexWrap and you say wrap, and if you apply it, you see, so if you just move like that, like that, so see how easy it is, FlexBox. So just move things around, and just it moves things for you and fills out the information. I mean, fills out the space that you have. So FlexWrap is also one of the elements of Flex. There's several other elements that we can talk about. There's there's Flex direction. So let's go back to the CSS tricks. And CSS tricks is the website, this website. So we have the container, which is this one, the background, and we have the elements. These are the elements. So all these are the properties of FlexBox. There is a property called Flex Direction. Flex Direction helps you so that if you want the elements to be horizontal, you could have them as horizontal like this, like we just had like the default way. So this is the default way because we don't have any flex direction. So if you add here flex direction, you have two options. So you have row and you have column. So these are two ways. And row gives you the horizontal, and flex by default is a row. So if you add flex direction, you're basically adding column. So if you add a row, you're just doing the same thing two times. So flex by default is a row. So if we say column here and we run, it just gives a column. And this is just a normal way. It just makes it so that each one takes the whole space, just like the block. That's one property of flex. It's flex direction. You could reverse the direction. So if we say here row reverse, if we say row reverse, it will take the first element. So now if we just get rid of this, see one is right here, so it just reverses the order. So it puts the 4 here and it moves the 1 to the last one. You could do the same thing with column, and it will just move 4 to the top. So you could do that too. So that's flex direction, is the direction that things go. So another thing you have is just we covered is flex wrap, is if you want to move the elements to a new line when there's not enough space. That's one way of doing it. So, and you could also say no wrap, and it will force that the elements don't go to the next line if you want to do that. There's a flex flow. Flex flow, this is basically shorthanded for flex direction and flex wrap. So if you want to apply it, you just say flex flow, and then you say column wrap, or you say row wrap. So it's the two things that we just talked about that are combined. Another really, really important aspect of Flexbox that you will come across all the time is justify content. Justify content is a way to align. So you guys have seen text align, right? So text align, this one is the text align for Flexbox. So you're basically aligning these boxes wherever you want. So either the first, so you say flex start, they will all align to the beginning. If you say flex end, they will align to the end, center, of course. But the ones that you haven't seen, or maybe you didn't expect, is space between. Space between will make it so that it fills out the space in between. So all the space that's left. So if you have, let's say, 50% space, then it will take put 25% here, 25% here. So it will just take all the space that's left and just fill out the space, but not at the end, but not on the like the walls. So to do that, you have space around. Space around is, let's say you have the 4% of his space, and you want to divide it into the whole space. It will give it like here 1 and 1 1 1. So it will just evenly divide the space. So this one is the one mostly used, space around. So let's actually practice that and see how that is actually used in real world. So let's just go back to normal flex row. So just like that. And I will actually make it like 3 of them so that we can see very drastically the change. So if we go here and we actually remove this and we say justify content, and we say here flex end, it will take the tech whatever you have the boxes and we'll move it to the end. So that's kind of obvious. If we put space between it will put a space between the elements. So another thing to keep in mind is that justify content is horizontal only. It's just that right here it says in the description. So always when you're confused about one of these things, just read the description. Just it says this defines the alignment along the main axis. The main axis is if you have a if you remember the graph where you have cross axis and the main axis, you have the y and you have the x. The justify content is the x. So it's just that's what it does only. So that's its job. It just aligns things through that x. It doesn't move things up and down. So so that's one thing to understand about justify content. So space around, and then there is the other property, which is space between, and then there's space around. I always use space around. The reason for that is it just gives nice evenly space right here. So you can see usually the reason why it looks like there's less space here is because mostly about padding and things like that, but it evens things out for you so that it looks nice and professional. So just like that, see, it looks nice. So that's one very important property of FlexBox is justify content. And if you haven't added display flex, this justify content will not work. So if you do that, this just doesn't affect anything at all. So it doesn't work at all. So make sure that when you're using justify content or any other FlexBox properties, you have to say the main container, you have to apply it display flex. Another thing to keep in mind as a note is that FlexBox doesn't go in more than one child level. So it doesn't go more than one level. So let's say if you have let's say you have this and you have another div here. So you have this one right here, and there's another div here that you have within this div. So this is the child div of this div. So now this will not affect that one. It will not affect it. So if you do that div, it will not affect. But now it's affecting because this is within this. So right now, if you try to affect this, so you're trying to affect the one and move it right here, it will not work. So that will not work because FlexBox only goes one level deep. It doesn't go more than one level. So if you have the container that we talked about right here, you have the container right here, it only affects these elements that is right next to the container. If you go one level deep and you put another thing here within the element, it will not affect that. So you cannot apply FlexBox things. So you have to apply display flex on this one. So you have to say this element by itself, display flex, and now the one that's inside it will have the FlexBox property. So that's also something important to keep in mind. Okay, let's keep going and just cover one more important aspect of FlexBox, which is align item. So we just talked about justify content. Justify content is just horizontal, right? Align item is the vertical, it's the y-axis. So it's the cross-axis. So this defines the default behavior of how flex items are aligned out along the cross-axis. So it's the opposite to justify content. So I don't know why they didn't call it something like cross axis or something like the y axis or something like that. But that's that's just FlexBox. So let's go and practice that and see how that actually works out. So let's just go back to the changes that we did to figure out how this align content things works. and align item things works is that we need to like make it bigger. So we need to add a little bit of a height to our thing. So right here to the CSS, so you have to add a little bit of height because we want this to be big so that we could go up and down in as a as a cross line item. So let's just remove this. And also now what is it doing is it's filling out the whole space. So we need to change that and say we could say align item center. So now what it's doing is it's just doing the default of align item, which is to fill out the whole space. But if we use this align item center and we put it right here, align item, and this is not the same as align text text align. So this is different. This is only for FlexBox. And we say center. So if we say center, it's not affecting. I think the reason for that is okay, let's see. What do we have here? Text align line height, width. Okay, let's go back to here. Flex container, flex display. Okay, so align item, is that how it's written? Align items. See, that's some of the things you keep in mind, is that sometimes you misspell it. So align items, as you can see. So that's what I was expecting, but I didn't add align item. It comes with S. So center. Now, if you wanna put it right at the top, you say I think it's flex start, and then you could say flex end, which will go all the way down. And also there is a couple of other properties that we can cover. So they show you visual here, flex start, flex end, da da da. And if the properties of these items are different, so if the height is different, it will just show you the height, how the different is. If you want to fill out everything, you have a stretch. So we could just say stretch here, and it will just fill out the whole space. Stretch. It just fill out the whole space. So that's another thing you could do. And then there's a baseline. Baseline will just center everything in the middle, but it will use like a ruler. So it will use some line of like invisible line to align all of them. So if we say baseline, I think that's how you spell baseline. Yeah, baseline. So it will use, sometimes it works, but you have to have some type of a specific, let me see. So okay, so you have to say var baseline, and there is other properties of baseline. Most of the time you will not worry about the baseline. Items are aligned such that as their baselines align. So yeah, most of the time you'll not worry about the baseline, but just if let's say we want to center one of them. Let's just get rid of two so that we have only one, and we want to center this in the middle. So if you ever want to center something, you basically use align item center and what is justify content center together. Now this means center this element vertically and horizontally. So now it's very in the middle. So that's really like important because it helps you center something. So if I ask you ever to center something with CSS, this is how you center. So we have like this big box and the center is that box. So this is how you center something. So there's other properties too. There's aligned content. Aligned content is a little bit different. So it says this aligns the flex containers line within where is extra space in the cross axis, similar to justify content aligns individual items within the main axis. So it basically aligns things in the vertically, but it usually we don't use aligned content. It's kind of like redundant of justify content. So you can use justify content and you'll be fine. There's a few other ones. There is let's go up. Sorry about that. There's order. We will not cover order, but it's basically if you want to order things in a certain way, you could use that. This is how you order it. You just say order item order. So you choose a specific item that that you have. So here we had a few other items. Let's just Go back. Let's undo the. Let's just add a few other elements. So just like we had before, few of them, 2 and let's say 3. So we have few of them. Let's zoom in. Now, if you want to have, if you want to order them, you could use this property, and by default it's 0. But if you want to make it so that 2 is, they switch these two, you say display. Okay, let's see. You say order 5. You actually have to have each one of them. You have to give them their own CSS class. So that's how you define the order, is by giving each one of them a class and saying something like 1, 2, 3, and then put this property, the order, and it will order that item what you defined. So that's also one. There's also flex grow, which allows you to which defines how fast the item grows. So let's say you have a couple of items. So let's just apply. We have to actually define a class here. That is the easiest way to figure out is by saying class, and let's give it a item 1 here, and let's give them give this one class of item 2, because if we want to demonstrate this, we have to give them these items their own CSS. Otherwise, it will not work. So we have that. Now we can describe and say, if we say something like that item 1, and we say, let's say, we give it so that it has a different property of flex grow. So it has, let's see, it has like 4. So let's say flex grow 4. Let's say flex grow 4. That means flex grow 4. It means that this item will grow. It will be as big as 4 times bigger than these ones. So if you shrink it, it will be, this one will wait until it reaches its the size of these. They will wait. So like that, it will wait until when it reaches, then these will get smaller, like it is, like the other one. But now when you make it bigger, they will stop. This will stop, and this will grow 4 times those. So after 4 times, it will just stop after that. But this one is responsive, so it will not stop. You have to give it a certain place to stop, otherwise it will not stop. But there's also flex shrink, which is the opposite of flex grow, and it shrinks. It makes it smaller than 3 times smaller than these. So if we just apply the first item and just do that, it becomes, so now when we make it much smaller, so this one becomes smaller and the other ones stay. So this one becomes 3 times smaller than these. So, but this is a little more advanced in the FlexBox. You could try it out in different ways, but a lot of times you don't have uses for it. So there's align self, and that's also a more specific one. You could read about it, but the main ones we covered. So that's how you mainly use FlexBox when it comes to FlexBox properties, and it's very, very powerful, especially when you want to make something like responsive website. Instead of basically trying to align things together by yourself, you just use display flex, and then that's it, done. Have you guys heard about Bootstrap? Who heard Bootstrap? Do you guys know what it is?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit what it is? We're not gonna cover it, but just I want to know where you guys at with.
I mean, it's pretty much like if you want to style a website, it's an easier way to style it, pretty much.
Yes. So we will not cover Bootstrap, but Bootstrap is a framework. It's a CSS framework. It allows you to build a website quickly, and it kind of takes care of the whole responsive thing. So instead of you doing the whole work of like doing the work we're doing right now, and we will cover something called media queries in a bit when we're covering the responsive part, but it takes all that, and it has Flexbox built in. So Bootstrap is a framework. It's not part of CSS. It's owned by I think Twitter. Twitter created Bootstrap. So it's an easy way of like just starting with a website and just building something that's nice and responsive. So FlexBox is built in Bootstrap. So that's why we're covering it, is because one of the most famous frameworks in the world, Bootstrap. Almost every developer, front-end developer, knows what Bootstrap is, and they always use it to get started with a website. So we just want to learn the technologies behind this. So that's why we're learning Flexbox. There's also another technology called CSS grids. CSS grid. So if you there's also a CSS tricks website for this to cover and like to learn that. It does the same thing for us as Flexbox, but the difference is that CSS grid is more it's bigger. It covers much more complex system. So if you want to build a whole website that's much bigger than normal websites, then you use CSS grids. If you're building a basic website, let's say your own portfolio or something like that, you can use Flexbox. So Flexbox mostly is used for like small parts of the website, but CSS grids is usually used for the whole to style the whole website, to basically say I want my website to be like this. So it's a little bit bigger. So you could just look into that and read it. But just let's focus on Flexbox for now, and the assignments and things like that, so that we can completely understand what it is and how to use it. Any questions about Flexbox you guys have? And I'm sure it's a lot to understand and a lot to comprehend for people who have never seen Flexbox. But after you practice and after you see the examples in the assignments and things like that, you will like it, and you will use it a lot. So any questions? Okay, let's see. If you're using Flexbox for a small website, do you need to use floating as well? No. So floating is usually used when you're doing things manually and you're trying to align elements by yourself without using any Flexbox or anything like that. So Flexbox, you have no need for floats anymore. So you will not say flow right, flow left. You just take those elements and put them in a container and say display flex, and then they will all come together. So no floats. Any other question you guys have about Flexbox? And read it up and maybe watch videos because everybody just explains it differently. So I would say just go to YouTube or something like that, watch a couple of videos. I actually made a video about Flexbox in the Somali language. You could watch on YouTube. So if you put something like Flexbox Somali, you will see my explanation, and I was teaching there in YouTube. So that's Flexbox. So we covered all this. So we can take 5-minute break before we cover responsive web design. What do you guys think? 5-minute break. Anyone wants to take that, or should we just continue?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Stand up a little bit.
Okay, better. Okay, so let's take 5-minute break, and we'll come back and cover responsive web design, and we will actually build a website, a web page today. So I'll show you all the steps how to build it. All right, I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. Let's put that 5-minute timer. Get your drink or something. See you soon. Okay, let's get back to it, inshallah. Let's see. Let's get back to it. So we're gonna cover a responsive web design on this section. We have about 30 minutes to cover. So in these 30 minutes, I'll explain what responsive web design is, and we'll also build a website. So so we'll see, inshallah, how that goes. So I think we have a CodeBin link here. You could try out. So this is just a tryout. So it's a small challenge that you could try out. So what is responsive web design? So in the world of modern day web design, your website needs to be responsive. And what does that mean? So your website needs to look nice on mobile devices. It needs to look nice on tablets. It needs to look nice on computers, and also in bigger screens like TV or something like that. So now, actually, the world we live in, more than 50% of the world actually browse with their phone. They come to your website using their phone. So it's really important to actually think about mobile first. There's something called mobile first design, where you think about your website. When you're designing the website, you think about how it's going to look like on the mobile. And we will do that. Actually, that was one of the examples we're going to do today, is that we'll start with building how it's going to look like on a mobile device, and then we'll move on to the desktop. So we will say, okay, let's move on to the desktop and kind of change the mobile design to a desktop. So in over time, when people were figuring out responsive, there were different types of responsive web design. But before that, there was a fixed layout. So a fixed layout is when you go to a website, it has a scroll bar at the end, at the bottom on your phone. So if you go to a website on a phone, it has a scroll bar at the bottom. It was designed only for desktop computers. The text is really small. The images are really small. You have to kind of pinch and zoom into the website to see any text or to see anything different. And it looks really bad. It looks very old. So that is a fixed layout, and that's how people used to design websites. They never thought about they never thought about designing for a mobile. So that's we moved on from that. Now almost more than 90% of the websites have at least some type of mobile friendly design. And then people were like, okay, we need to kind of like think of a way of kind of changing the design, the desktop design, to a mobile without thinking about without kind of like specifically designing for mobile. So now people went and they started something called fluid layout. I think this fluid layout was around 2005 or before that. So fluid layout is basically all you do is just you use percentage. You say, okay, if someone comes to our website and the device is small, make the percentage bigger. And if the device is small, is big, make the percentage small, so that it kind of zoomed out. And then it's just zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. So this is not good. So because it makes it so that some of the images are big, some of the images are small. It's just not consistent. So, and also there are some elements that will overlap, and you just have to think about a way to kind of like design your website so that things don't overlap. And it's very painful when you see that design, because the person didn't put effort into actually designing a custom design for the mobile. And then there was adaptive, which is a little bit better than fluid layout. So it says adaptive layout borrow from the speed of fixed layout, but accommodates different devices specific breakpoint. So when adaptive layout came, it's basically saying you're using media queries, which is which we will learn today. Media queries is basically you tell CSS that if the device is mobile, give this CSS. If the device is tablet, give it this CSS. And how do you know if the device is mobile? You just use the width. So you say most devices that are mobile are around like 500 pixels wide. So we just say anything smaller than 500 pixels, give it this design and make the website look like this. Anything between 500 to like maybe 700, make it like this, and that's a tablet. So most of tablets are like the width of the screen is mostly like 700 pixels. And then you say anything above that, just make it as normal as possible for desktop. So that was adaptive layout, just so you just adapt to different devices. So after that came responsive layout, which took everything that we learned from fluid, adaptive, and put it together. So responsive layout is the one we're gonna learn, and it's the style that we're gonna build the websites. So responsive layout has breaking points. It has the percentage within the design, so that between the 700 and between the 500, the tablet and the mobile, the website changes. It morphs easily. It just moves very fluidly. So I was actually given an example of this. Let me show you example. In this CSS tricks also we could use this as an example. Right now, if you want to test a website, and you want to see how it looks like in a mobile, if you're using let's say Chrome, you right click it and you click inspect, and then within the inspector there is an icon that gives you a way to toggle mobile or desktop or tablet. So in this part, it gives you here, you have different devices. So you have iPhone 7, 6, 8. You have iPhone X right here. So these are the sizes of these devices basically. You have iPad. So that's how it looks like an iPad. You have a iPad Pro, and you have if you have Galaxy. So this is Galaxy S5. I think that's pretty old. I think this is the old Galaxies, but I think there's Galaxy 21 now. So there's these devices. So you could just look at your website, and this is free. It's part of the Chrome extension, Chrome system. So that's nice, but we want to know the responsive. We want to know if this website actually has a responsive design. So you tap responsive, and if you choose one of these, that's adaptive. So that's adaptive. So you just choose one of them, so the website adapts to that. But we want to test the responsiveness of the website. What we mean by responsiveness, we mean that when we let's zoom it in, let's say 100%. Okay, so when it does that, so this is how the website looks like from 832 pixels wide. So that's the width. If we make it smaller, we want things to change. So as you can see, slowly the website changes and it just morphs into a different something different. So now we are at like 502. If it goes under 500, most websites change something completely. So this website actually didn't change anything yet. And as you can see, things are just getting close to each other. And I was looking at, let's go to another website. I was looking at GitHub, where they actually remove something from the website. If we go to, let's go to here, go to my profile. And as you can see here, so yeah, so that's what I was talking about. So when you're so we're looking at this website right now, and it has the logo and has the navigation here. So now we go and you look at this number, which is the width of this. So this is mostly a little bit bigger than a tablet. This is more like a desktop. So you keep going down, and let's see how it changes after like 700. So see, as you can see here, I mean, after like 770. So right there, it actually changes the whole menu, the whole navigation is completely gone. And it became something called a hamburger menu. So right here, it's called the hamburger menu or hamburger navigation. Basically, it's a hamburger because it's like there's 3 lines and it's like it looks like hamburger. But if you click it, it just things has a drop down right there. So now it has hidden a lot of things. So if we actually go back, there's a search box there, which is really important for this website. and all this. There's the your profile, and there's the add button. All that stuff. All that stuff is gone, and they're all hidden here. I mean, most of them. I don't see the add thing. So sometimes you kind of have to sacrifice something. Very small things that you could find in other places on the website. You sacrifice them and you just remove them in your like tablet or in your phone, so that the website looks nice. So now if we just keep going and we go to the mobile, the mobile things just stack upon each other instead of like becoming like next to each other. So as you see here, there's boxes here. There's this box and there's this box. So if we zoom out and if we make it bigger, at certain point they will go next to each other, and that's the FlexBox that we talked about. A certain point right there. So from 700 like 50, and it changed. So right there, things changed. So that's what we're talking about when we say responsive, is that a certain point, breaking point, you change it, but between those 2 points, you kind of move the website and make it look nice without it jumping from like mobile to a tablet to desktop, and between them, it doesn't look nice. So that's example of responsive layout. So now you understood what responsive layout is and what's used for. Let's actually build a actual website for the time we have left. Let me show you how the website looks like that we'll be building. So this is how the website looks like. It's called the Great Idea website. So this website, it's responsive because things change as you kind of like make it smaller and become like a tablet, and also you could use your browser as like a testing. So if you make your browser smaller, it should pretend like it's a phone or it's a tablet. So as you can see, when we get to like around like 500, things just get stacked up each other, and they create this stacking because it is easier for mobile. So if you view on a website and you see things that like this, it's easier for mobile. We don't have the hamburger menu because it is, it's a little more advanced. You have to have some little bit of JavaScript. You have to know a little bit of JavaScript to hide that, but we're using this. So so as you can see here, these are stacked up each other. But if we zoom out, you see. So we're gonna learn that. So let's build this actually, and let me show you how it looks like. So let's just start from scratch and go to a folder. I created a folder. There's nothing in this folder. There's two folders. There's CSS and there's images. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy. Let me just open. Let me open this. So this is the folder we just looked at. There's nothing. There's no CSS. So let's add a CSS file there. Let's say styles.css. So in this part of the lesson, it's just I'm gonna go through quickly each part, and I'm gonna try to explain everything I'm doing, but I will not go into like explain concept. So if you have any question or you think I'm doing something that you don't understand, just to let me know. I'll stop and explain it. So we just go a little quicker because we don't have a lot of time left. I have about like 20 minutes left. So and we'll create the HTML file here, index.html. And I'm recording this. And index.html. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy the HTML because we don't want to cover the HTML. We already know HTML. We just want to cover the responsive CSS part. So let me just copy the CSS, the HTML code, so that I'll explain what it is and how it looks like. What are we doing? So if we come here and we paste, so this is a basic HTML code. So we start with the HTML tag. We give it a meta tags on the title. We have a we have a font from Google. So Google has free fonts that you could use in the internet, and you could just get the link from Google and set it to the font. So you say link, you pretend it like it's a CSS. You say link, and then you give it the Google font. So you could Google it and say Google fonts and how to add them to HTML file, but we will not cover this for now. There's also viewport. So actually, I haven't covered viewport, so I need to cover that so that you understand what it is. A viewport, I had actually a slide that explains a little bit better. But a viewport let's go to W3 schools. Let's say viewport. So viewport is part of the HTML. So it's in the header. So you say meta, and then you name it viewport. So this mainly, in general, what it does is that it tells the browser that it tells them, okay, go ahead and look at the device you have. So it checks the device it has and the width of the device. So it says, okay, so what is the width of the device? And then it tracks that. So if the width of the device is like 500, it sets your viewport. A viewport is what do you see, like the part of the website that you see. It says set the viewport to the width of the device. So the device you have, and change the viewport of the website, the width of the website, change it to the device that you're looking at. And then this one, initial scale 1, it means set the initial scale of the website, so the zoom of the website. So from if you have seen websites, like if you use Chrome, there's a zoom a thing here that you could zoom in the website. So it's like that zoom, but it's a default zoom for like the browsers. Set that to 1, which is like 100%. So that's what it's basically saying. So you could read here a little bit about a viewport. It's really important to understand what viewport is when it comes to responsive web design. But that's what we explain. That's what it is. Right here it says the width equal to device minus width. Part sets the width of the page to follow the screen width of the device. So it's kind of like the wording is kind of strange, but you just have to understand, like it's basically telling the website follow the device that the person is using. If they're using a mobile, change the width to the width of the mobile. If they're using the desktop, change the width of the website to the width of the desktop. I mean the width of the change the website to the width of the desktop they're using. Initial scale. So they say here the initial scale, which is 1, part sets the initial zoom level when the page is loaded first. So first loaded by the browser. So the first time it loads, it sets to 1, which is like 100%. So that's all you have to understand about this, but you could read more about it. And there's things that it does. And so it says do not use large fixed width elements. So there's some size content to the viewport, some information about the viewport that you could read a little bit more, but we don't want to go deep into it. It's just basically it helps the website. It helps the website see the device that it's using. All right, and then we have our CSS. As you can see here, our CSS is in folder, so we have to actually say CSS / and then we have styles, and we have styles here, so it's good. We have here a section that we called it's basically the logo and also the navigation. We called it the nav, but it also combines the logo too. We have a header, which is the call to action that we looked at. This part is the header. So the text, this text, and the button is right here, this button, and the image right here. Also, we have more sections. So these 2 sections are right here. So this is called the primary detail. It has ID called primary detail, and we also have an image in the middle, which is right here. So this image is right here too. So it has its own section. So and the rest is exactly the same. Just repeating. So let's start with the CSS, and let's start with the CSS reset. So I'm just copying the CSS reset that we usually use. And if you haven't heard about that, there's a website there you could copy the CSS reset. CSS reset is a code of CSS that resets the whole default CSS of the browser. So we just copy this. We add in our CSS file right here, like that. And I usually put a comment here, but we could just skip that. Let us get started. So the first thing we will define is after we also add a little bit of default properties. So these default properties are like the width of the body, is the box sizing. So let's just go here. So we added these properties. These properties is it sets the width of the whole page of the whole website to 100, 1,000 to 100. It changes the margins to 0 and auto, which is centers the website. We have a font family, which is also the one we get from Google. So font family, you could change the font family to whatever you want. So if you say something just like font family, you have all these font families by default in this editor. Font family is just like when you're changing font in Microsoft Word, just like that. You could change the fonts here if you want. So that's font family. Another thing I want to cover quickly, I think we're going to go over the the time, maybe 10-15 minutes. But another thing I want to cover is, and we'll cover box sizing another time. We could actually look at it right now, just read a little bit about it. So box sizing, what is box sizing? Box sizing, border box. Box sizing, border box. It's used in, let's see, it's right here. So it says here, the box size in CSS property sets how the total of width and height of the element is calculated. So it basically takes the, so right here, if we set to box size into content box, so the box we have, it goes within the content. It becomes as big as the content basically. And then there's the box. The one we're using is box border box. It allows us so that if there is a border, we can see the border, and it doesn't hide the border, or it doesn't alter the border. So it makes it obvious so that we see the size of the border basically. So it's used for as a default element in a website, so that you don't have any side effects most of the time. So read a little bit about it here if you want, but we'll go into it another time when we're building bigger websites. But in generally, it's basically to make the website so that it doesn't you don't have any side effects where there is a size that you didn't calculate when you're doing the width, the padding, and the margins. So okay, so that's box sizing. Another quick thing that I want to cover is something called CSS units. And all this is good to understand for responsive web design. CSS units. CSS units is that, remember when you're setting a font, like font size, you guys were using like 12 pixels, something like that, right? Pixel is it's called it's right here. It's called absolute. It doesn't change, so it's not responsive at all when you have pixels. So absolute lengths are these. So pixels is one of them. So pixel are relative to view in the device for low DBI devices. So pixels don't change. So if your device zooms in, zooms out, it does not change. It just stays the same. So it is fixed. There's also relative lengths, which are responsive. So they change according to how big the screen is and how small the screen is. So if you zoom into your website, they get bigger. If you zoom out, they get smaller. And some of them is the two things that we'll use is M and rem. So M is a unit, it's a size unit that changes according to the parent element. So if the parent element, let's say you have a parent element of size, let's say 2 pixels, then M will become like it will be like 2 pixels 2 times, it will become like 4M. So you usually don't use this, because if you have a lot of things that are nested, then the size of M will become bigger. I know it's a little bit confusing. I'm sorry if this is not making a lot of sense, but the main thing you need to understand is these are responsive. So I recommend from now on, use rem. From now on, if you want to have a width, or if you want to say something like font size, and that you want to give it a size, use rem. So if you want to use M, then that you need to understand the parent element. The reason why we use rem is that rem looks at the root. So the root is actually the root for the browser is the zoom root, basically. Right here, like if we go up here, the zoom of the browser, it looks at the zoom of the browser. It says, okay, the zoom is 100%. I'm gonna keep it exact at 100%. And when it's keeping 100%, it means it's like, if it's like 2 rem, then it stays 2 rem. But if you increase the percentage of the screen or the browser, then it changes according to that. So it's much easier to kind of like follow. So I would say use rem when you're using when you kind of like trying to set something. Another thing to keep in mind is that what is the relationship between rem and pixels? How many pixels are in rem? So there's a website actually that can calculate. So you could say pixel rem calculator, and I'll share this website, and it will show you that 1 pixel, and I mean 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels. So let's see. I think this is a better website. No, this is not a good one. Let's see this one. Yeah, this one is good. So now you have pixels. So if you say 16 pixels, it's 1 rem. If you say 32 pixels, it's 2 rem. So remember how 32 is big, like it makes the font really big. So rem 2 is really big. So if you say 2, it means like make it really large. So now we have 1.2 rem here. So that means it's 1.2 rem. Who can do the math quickly? 1.2 rem. So if 1 rem is 16 pixels, how much is 1.2 rem? So we could just actually type here. It's 19.2 pixels. So yeah, so that's CSS units. Always when you build in a responsive website, always use relative or responsive units. Okay, so let's move on. Let's actually build the website. So how does the website look like right now, actually? So let's just actually open it here. And what I will do, this is how it looks like right now. What I will do is I'll put it right next to the editor so that we can actually see the changes right away. So let's close this. Okay, let's close this and let's put it. Let's put it to the side, and let's put this one to this side. So let's make it smaller. So we will start with a mobile part. So now the website is just a mess. It doesn't look anything, but we will start with the mobile and then we'll go to the desktop. Okay, so the first thing we will do is we will describe, let's see, let's go over to my note. First thing we'll do is we will describe the logo. So the logo is right here. It's right here. The logo is right here. It has a class called the logo. So we will target that. We'll say dot logo. And then we'll give it a display block. And don't worry about this. This is not part of it's the logo is not in a container, so that's why we're not giving it like flex. And then we'll give it a margin of 1 rem auto. Okay, so now, and also I wish we could like just it refreshes automatically. Let's just close this and let's go to here. I wish I could like open it automatically, but it's fine. I will just refresh it manually. Let's close it. Okay, so if we open the editor right here and the browser right here, let's make it bigger, a little bit bigger. If we refresh it now, we don't see a lot because it's not, we just said make the margin, we changed the margin. Another thing is we don't have the images. So let me just copy the images from that folder to this folder. So I think the first folder is the one that we're looking for. So let's just copy these images because the logo is in there. And let's paste it in here so things look nicer. So now if we refresh, you should have the images. So now you can see the logo is actually it's a centered kind of. So we'll move on. So let's target the nav, which is this one. So the nav is right here. This is the nav. So this is our navigation. So we'll say nav, open it, and are you guys with me? I feel like I'm talking to myself. Okay. I hope you guys are here. Didn't sleep. Okay, we'll say display flex. The reason we're saying display flex is that it's a container. Nav is a container for all this. So we want all this to align properly. So all we did, we just added display flex, and now it will align like actually let's just refresh. It's actually already aligned, but it is let's see. Oh, okay. We need to align it. Actually, this is different because we're doing mobile, so we need to align it vertically. So we need to align them vertically. So to align vertically, we say flex direction, and we give it column. And now this is what we're looking for. We were looking for it to become like this. Okay. Someone send me chat. Oh, you guys are listening. Okay, good. Yeah, the more you pay attention, the more you will absorb, and it will be easier for you to like kind of recall all this stuff. After it's a lot of information, but you will recall it. It will just kind of go into your brain, and when you sleep, it just that memory will kind of be will get better. You'll remember better all this stuff. All right. So another property we'll add is we'll align the text. So keep in mind that we're doing actually the mobile first. So we have to align things like vertically in the center. So we say center. And now if we refresh, it will just align this in the center. Next thing we will target is the actual links. So we will say nav and then A. We will also give this property color of black. So who can tell me what is the hex of black? Hex color black. We covered that last time. Who remembers it? Yep, 000. Okay, good. Thank you. So 6 zeros, you could actually have 3 too, but we'll keep it 6. Is that 6? Yeah. That's I think that's 6. No, that's 5. All right, 6. Let's see. Okay, and then we'll do text decoration. We'll say none because we don't want it to have the link. We don't want it to have like the underline in here. We'll say we'll give it a border top of 1 pixel, solid, and we'll give it a color of B4, let's say B6, and B7. And we'll give it a border bottom of 1 pixel, and we'll give it solid. Oh, sorry, this was supposed to be, yeah, that's border top, yeah. And we'll give it the same color. We'll say, yeah, just you can select it here. We'll give it padding of 0.5 rem. So you could use the rem for also the padding size. So now if we save it and we refresh it, as you can see, it kind of aligns nice. And this is the mobile we'll create in the mobile, so it looks nice. The next thing we will target is the header. So this section, and that's supposed to be the banner, the call to action section. So let's just say header and give it a text align of center. Let's give it a let me just scroll up. Let's give it a another property padding bottom of let's give it 3 rem. I mean, let's give it a margin of 0 and 1 rem. Let's give it a border bottom of 2 pixels, solid black. You could just say black if you want, by the way. And if we save that, it should be kind of like centered. So this is all centered. Okay. So the next thing we'll cover is we will target the H1 in the header, which is this one, which is the text that we're looking for. That says innovation on demand. So we'll say header H1, and we will say we're going a little bit over for the time the lecture is going to end, so keep that in mind. So we'll give it a 3 rem because it's big text, and we'll give it a line height of 1. Okay, and also we'll give it a bottom margin bottom of 1 rem. So now it just has a little breathing space, and also it's much bigger. Okay, let's also target that button right here, this button. We'll give it a header. We'll say header button, and say a border of, let's give it a border of 1 pixel, solid black. Let's give it a color of black. And when I say color, it's targeting the text only. Let's give it a padding of 0.1 rem and 2.5 rem. We might change that a little bit, but it should kind of like look a little bit nicer. We'll give we'll get rid of this actually for the responsive when you're looking at the mobile. And remember, we said that sometimes you have to sacrifice something in a mobile, so for things to look nice. So now we'll sacrifice the image. So, and we'll do that right now. So how do you make something disappear in CSS? Can anybody give me a? We actually covered that. How do you make something disappear in CSS?
Display none.
Right. So display none. So now if we refresh it, it should, that whole image should disappear. And when we make it bigger, it should appear, but we'll use something called media query for that. So media query. So we'll use the media query at the bottom. So it will be the last part of we'll cover. So now let's target, let's target all the sections. So this section and all the sections, and let's give them a margin. So let's say section margin, small margin. Let's give it 0 and 1 rem. So it gives them a nice space. And actually, let's give it a let's give it small here. Let's give it maybe like another 1 rem here too. Yeah. Actually it will cover it. Yeah. So let's just keep it 0 because it actually, I already thought about that, and I'm just repeating myself. So now let's target the div in all this div in all sections. So we say section div, and we will also give this margin of 2 rem and 0. So now we give that. So that's one way to give it. We give it a little bit of space at the top. Okay. So let's also target the H1, these headers, the figures and about. Let's target those. So let's say section H2. It's not H1, H2. Font size, we want them to be a little bit bigger, so we say 1.25 rem. If someone can calculate that in 4 pixels, that would be nice. If you could do that on top of your head, that'd be impressive. 0, 0, and we'll give you a margin of 0.5 rem. Save it, and let's see how it looks. It's a little bit bigger, as you can see. Okay, let us target the class, the first class. Let's target, okay. Let's target the first class, which is I think it's the primary, right? Primary detail. Let's see. Primary detail. Okay. So I haven't. Okay. So section detail. We have secondary detail, which is this one. So let's see. So that's good. Secondary detail. Okay, let's do that. Let's target the actually secondary detail first before that. So we just copy this, and it's an ID. So How do we target ID in CSS? So this is ID, it says ID here. How do we actually create in CSS?
Hashtag.
A point? You guys sure about that?
Hashtag.
Now it's actually I think it's a pound sign.
Okay, the pound sign, yeah. So the point is the class. So that's also, it's kind of, people confuse that all the time, the point or the pound sign or the hashtag. So people confuse that. So it's a normal thing. So we say hashtag secondary class, secondary detail, and then we'll give it a border of bottom, and we'll say 2 pixels, solid black. And that will give it so that it's this one, this part. We will target this image in the middle. So we'll say it has a class of middle image right here. So this class, it has that class. So now this is where you use the dot, middle image, and we'll give it a max width of 100%. So now it should kind of like fit. I mean, we don't have a lot of space here, but it will fit. So the more you make it bigger, the more it gets bigger. Okay. Another thing we'll target is the address. We could target this address, but we will skip that, the address. So we will target, let's target the footer. Let's see. I think the section that's missing is the primary detail. So let me see where that is at. So primary detail. Okay, so primary detail, we want it to be exactly the way it is right now. So we want it to be like this. And then when it gets bigger, we want it to be right next to each other. So right now we'll keep it as it is. And then when we get to the media query, we will change it. So let's keep it as that. So now, let's see. So now we have covered all that. The middle image, we can cover the address, but let's cover the footer. Let's just give a little bit to the footer because there's not much in the footer. So let's say footer, and let's give it a text align, center, and let's give the font size of 0.8 rem. And if we look at that, there's not much in there, but there's a copyright. Okay, so now we're done with that. Let's do the media query. So media query is a way to tell CSS to change how the website looks like when you reach a certain size of your browser. So the browser, when you make it bigger, it changes the size. So this is like 500, let's say, pixels, and this is like maybe 700 pixels, and this is like 100 and like 40 pixels. I mean, 1,040 pixels, 1,400 pixels, 1,000 maybe 200 pixels, maybe 900 pixels here. So so the media query is a way to change and say, okay, if the width of the device, either mobile or website or browser, whatever, if it's 500, so then we do something. So this is how you do that. So you say at media. So that's how you start with the media query. At media, we say if the minimum width is 500 pixels. So this is actually if statement basically in CSS. So you're saying basically if the minimum width is 500 or less, that's basically what it's applying to. So the minimum is as minimum as it can go. So this is kind of like the minimum, and then if you go up, it's the maximum. So the minimum is anything after the minimum you go down, it basically means it's the same thing. It's the style will stay the same. So we say that, and then we say okay, and then we say okay, let's target an element. So let's target the nav and make it different. So you say minimum, but if it goes up, anything above that, then we say, okay, this is the CSS you will apply to. So anything above that, this is what you apply to. You say flex direction, and then we say row. Remember at the beginning, we say nav, we said flex direction, we said flex direction column. So that was a column, but now we will change it as it goes up and it gets bigger. We will change it to a row, so it looks nice. Did someone send me something? Okay, looks good. All right, so let's go back, and so now we have the nav, and we'll also add we'll add justify content, and we'll say space around, so it looks nice all together, and they all fit together. So now if we actually test it out, if we refresh it, actually let's make it smaller. Okay. Let's see. It's the minimum width 500 pixels on the nav. Okay, should have been like that. It should have been. So let's see. Add media, minimum width, and then the nav. Oh, I think there's things that we didn't change. Okay, so let's actually keep going, and then we say nav a. Let's say border 0, and also let's see that. Okay, something didn't change, so that changed the border. Let's go back to actually the original website that we were targeting. See how that looks like if that was the case. Let's go to here. Let's check it out. So it should be like this when it's smaller. When it gets bigger, it should be like that. So that's what it should be. So let's actually change that, the CSS, and figure out where the problem is coming from. So right now, so we go to nav, we say display flex, we say column in a normal way. Okay, so that's what it is when it's a mobile, and say flex, and then so this one looks good. So all these look good. Maybe the media query we haven't set up properly. Media query, minimum width. Let's say some here max width. Okay, so minimum width is, it should be minimum width pixels. Let's see. Sometimes you could have like a little error in the somewhere in the middle, and that kind of like throws things off. Flex direction row. Okay, possession row, justify. So it should be like that. Let me just redo it again. Nav flex direction row. So flex direction row. Okay, let's get rid of this whole media query. Yeah, it should be like that. So now when we add the media query, it should go the opposite. So it should be at media. So this is live debugging. So sometimes when you have issue, this is how you kind of figure it out. You just try something different. You go back and do what you did, so that the errors kind of like show themselves. So when we do that, we say nav and give it a flex direction of row. So that should make it so that it should stay like this, and then when it reaches above 500, it should change. But now it's changing this, so there's issue with that. Okay. So let's figure out where that's coming from. So this means that right now the problem exists within here. So display flex column. So if you say this on row, it doesn't make a difference because it's already row. So let's see. Let's make it bigger. Stays the same. Okay. Let's see. Did we select any wrong nav? Let's go back to the HTML. Let's see. ID nav bar. Oh, I think I selected the wrong thing. Yeah, I selected. I should have made the nav bar. I should have give it 0 margin. And let's see, any nav bar. So let's add that into CSS. So right after this, we should add ID nav bar, margin 0. So let's see, margin 0. Okay, margin 0. We added that. Okay, let's see now. Let's go back to here. Okay, flex direction column. Did we misspell this? Okay. It should be like that. So let's just figure it out. Let's look at this. The logo is fine. The navigation. So nav, and then we selected this. So
How many
now,
pixels is the website?
what is that?
How many pixels is the website?
So now it's about like, this is about like 500 pixels, and we could actually test it in the inspect right here, and we could say like give it like a mobile or something. Okay, so it actually, let's see. So let's give it responsive. So actually, you're right. So we're not actually reaching 500. So when it reaches 500, see it changes. So it's actually it's not reaching 500. So you're actually right. So we're the ones who are wrong. So thank you for pointing that out. So things are actually right. It's just that we are not reaching the 500 point. So let's go back to what we were doing. So we are right, and thank you for pointing that out. We just didn't reach there. Okay. So we're good. So let's go to let's say let's keep going with the CSS. All right. So let's add justify content here. Just justify content. No, yeah, justify content, and let's give it a space around. Let's add here. Let's add here nav a, and target that, and say border 0. And also target the h the header h1, which is this one, this text. Okay, let's say header h1. So we're in the 500. So anything under above 500, this is the changes that are gonna happen. So if you want something to happen, anything under 500, you say here max. So anything under 500, this is what's gonna happen. So now everything above 500, this is what's going to happen. So this is how the CSS is gonna change. So we say font size to 4 rem. So we make it much bigger, and we say margin bottom, and we say a 1.5 rem. Okay. So the next thing we will do is we will target header button. So we'll go quicker because we don't have a lot of time. So we say font size 1 rem. So we're changing the font size of this button. So now as you can see, if we go above 500, which we can't reach right now, and I think the reason is because we have a lot of websites open here. Let's maybe close all these websites. That's stopping us from reaching 500. So all these are the references that we went through. So it's not happening, but we can test it in the browser. So so that, and let's go add. Okay, let's see where we can add more. Okay, so primary detail, we can add all that, but let's just make the primary detail flex and give it a space. Let's give it a space around. So let's target, which is this section. This section, we want things to be right next to each other when we go above 500. So let's see. So we want the primary. We say primary detail. So primary detail. So this has the details, and then we also target the secondary details too. Secondary details. Target those, and we say display flex. So, and then we give it justify content, and then we say space around. Okay, and we can also change the width of each one of these. So we could say something like, we could say primary. Let's copy this instead of typing it again. We say primary detail. Let's say div here, and give it a width of 48%. So this width is how big this section is when it's like right next to each other, 48 pixels, and I mean 48%. Okay, and this is the reason why we're doing this. It's not because the reason is these are the flex items, but within them there is no flex, so it's just one item. So that's why we're giving it percentage. We're not applying the flex to it. So right now it should be right next to each other like that. Okay, so it looks nice. So all of them look nice the way we expected them to be. So I don't see a lot. The only thing is just we need to make the navigation look nice, and also make the image appear, the big image that we were working on. So let's add that. So we will create a new what do you call media query for that. So we want that to do after 800. So we'll say at media, and then we'll say min width, not min windows. I don't know what that is. Min width. We want this to be 800 pixels, and then close it with and say, okay, we want to target the navigation bar. Nav bar on target. Couple of things. We will say display flex. So actually, I think this is where the issue is coming from, maybe. So display flex, and we will say flex direction. We will say row reverse, and I'll tell you what that means. So this means that we want the logo to go to go to this side, and the navigation to go to this side instead of the usual way. So we say the flex direction row reverse. We want to put justify content. We want to put center. We also want to add align items, which allows us to center everything. And we say center. We add a little bit of padding, 1 rem and 0. We add margin at the bottom, so it doesn't touch the banner or the call to action. So button, not bottom, 3 rem. Okay. Now let's target the logo. So we say logo, and then we say margin. We give it a little bit of margin. We say 0, 0, 0, and we say 2 rem. Let's target the navigation. These ones, the navigation by themselves. So we say nav A, and then we give them a margin of 0 and 1.2 rem. We went way over the time, so I'm sorry about that. We will also target header, and then we say display flex, and we'll say justify content. We'll say space between this time, and that the header is this section. So now we're putting the image that we supposed to have and this one right next to each other. So that's why we have this one, and then we will target the header div and say we'll give it a width of 50%. All right. And okay, and after that, the only thing left is the image, the big image, and that was a hero image, and we'll give it display block. Display block, you can give it display block because it's not a flex, so it's container. So it's not in a flex container, so we can give it block. So we'll say width, and we'll give a width of 350 pixels, and we could give a height of auto. So now things should become normal like that. So we moved the logo from here to here, and we move these to right here. So now things look nicer. And if we make it smaller, it should change. But now it's not changing because our thing is not small enough. But if we do that and make it less than 500, it becomes like that. Actually, let's make this one, this media query, maybe like 650. So that we could just, look at it exactly. So if we do that and we refresh it, and it should, yeah. So it should look like that. And when we make it smaller, this should disappear, and this should be in the center, 600, and that, see, and then after that, this should become like vertical like that. So in this way, it looks nicer in the mobile, and everything's stacked. So that's it. Sorry for taking all this time, but I thought it was really important to see how to create media queries on a responsive website, so that you could in the future, on the next assignment, you can work on it. So yeah, so that's it. So do you guys have any question about what we just did? Any confusion that, I know it's a lot. I'm not expecting you guys to know everything, but anything that you want to point out and ask me a question about. Any question about media queries and all that?
I have a question that's more general.
Okay.
You gave us a lot of resource and they're rich with details and information. How do we assimilate this? How do we best utilize it? Because I feel like reading, it's just seems to be a lot. And I wish I had way more time to really kind of dig into it. So how do we really get to all this stuff and
Okay.
you know?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. And I give advice to students all the time on my YouTube, and we kind of talk about this. The best way to utilize all the things I give you guys is practice. So if I give you assignment, let's say if I tell you to create a website that looks like this, the best thing to do is, if you want to read, you could read, and if you have the time, you could read. But you could skim and read maybe the captions and the small text and understand the concept. But if you want to understand in a practical way, I would say try building something, try breaking something, try making something look something that's already broken, try fixing it. And the best way to learn is, okay, now I'm stuck, so what should I do? I should use FlexBox. Okay, so what is FlexBox? Okay, how do I use it? And then you just try it out. So you go to your code and you just try things out, and you say, okay, now I applied here, but nothing is happening. Why is that? And then you understand what is a container. Okay, I didn't understand what container is. So container is the top parent. Okay, so it's basically just you create something, you break something, and then you apply the knowledge that what do you learn. So instead of just reading for the sake of reading, the best way to learn is by practicing and then going back to the reading, understanding what the FlexBox is, and then coming back and breaking something, and just getting confused about what you're doing, going back to FlexBox. Okay, let me understand what the container is itself, and then you apply that knowledge. So you just go back and forth instead of just reading. The best way to observe is to observe the whole knowledge that you have, that you received, is by practice, just doing the thing and breaking it. Don't worry if you break it. Just keep doing it. Keep trying different things. So that's the best way to learn. I mean, the best way to apply all this knowledge the links I give you and all this stuff. I think I hope that helps. That makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, it does.
Okay. Any other questions you guys have in general or specific, anything before we close out? We want to buff.
Do we have an assignment?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Sorry for not pointing that out. We do have
No, thank you.
assignment. Go to the training material, go to today's lesson, go all the way at the bottom, and we have this assignment right here. So click it. It will take you to GitHub. You do the same usual stuff, fork it, and then read the instructions. So read this instruction. We have a design here. and it shows just basic responsive layout of how a website should look like. And this website should be I don't know, it's not rendering. It should be the website you worked on last time. So the I think you guys worked on Fatima Restaurant. So the website you worked on, it should be mobile friendly. So it should look like this. Put the logo at the top, put the menus like this, and put the rest of the content like this. So if you could do this, and in mobile, if you view it in mobile, it looks like this. That's basically your assignment. So just read this and the instruction here, set up your project, which we usually do all the time, the minimum viable product. So this one is, yeah, this assignment is due tomorrow night, tomorrow night at 9:30 or 10 p.m. Minnesota time. So use this checklist for the work. So and I'll say, so when you have the HTML file that you worked on, insert instant viewport. So use this viewport and the one I just worked on, and I can actually share the code I worked on today. So I'll share that link so you could just use it as a reference. And then introduce a max width media queries, or you could use a min width. So use these breaking points. So the time tomorrow is 6 to. So tomorrow is actually Saturday. So tomorrow we will start in the morning. Sorry, I kind of confused with the days. Tomorrow is Saturday, so this assignment is actually due tomorrow morning. So you will have from 9 a.m. to in 4 hours. So it will be 10, 11, 12. So you'll have till 12. So around like 12:30, we will have our usual stand up. So we will divide Saturday as like 2 days. So we will have the actual assignment due tomorrow, and then after that we'll have the stand up. We will have a break of 1 or 2 hours, and then we'll have a lecture again. So that's tomorrow. Sorry for not explaining clearly the schedule tomorrow, but tomorrow you're expected to be here from 9 to 7, but we will you work on your assignment from 9 to, I'll remind you guys, from 9 to in 4 hours, from like 12 p.m. 12 a.m. This is p.m. and 12:30, and then from there on we will have a quick stand up. I'll answer your questions, guys. We'll figure things out, and then after that you take a break, you go to lunch, 2 hours, and then after that we'll come back for lecture. Tomorrow we'll cover another lesson. So it's a packed days. Sorry, tomorrow it's going to be packed, but we have to catch up, and that's how we catch up. So yeah, so this assignment is due tomorrow. Just the work you already worked on, the assignment, just make it responsive. That's basically it. That's the assignment. So that's your work. I will share the calendar that I've been working on. Inshallah, I'll share maybe tomorrow or Sunday, so that you guys have a clear image of what's coming. So yeah, just follow this instruction and you'll be fine, inshallah. Any questions? And I'm sorry about the confusion of schedule and all that, but tomorrow just be there and I will explain everything to you guys. And tomorrow just 9 start. I'll remind you in the text in the room. Start 9 to 12. So that's your work time. Okay, we'll close out. Any question? Any last questions?
Will this video be ready by then?
With that?
This video will be ready by then, by tomorrow morning.
Oh yeah, this video I'll post it right like after an hour from now. So it will be up there in the Slack. So it will be in this room.
Ustad, if somebody didn't finish the work from yesterday, they can move to this one, right?
So if you haven't finished the work from yesterday, finish. Yeah, so finish as much as you can, probably tonight, and you could also keep working on it tomorrow. But I will just do as much as you can, and try to apply responsiveness to it as you go. So instead of just doing without responsive, if you haven't finished it, do with responsive. So use the FlexBox and what we learned today to kind of like align things and make it look nice. So if you haven't finished it, just use the responsive and keep working on it. You don't have to do the exact way we did on the last lesson. If you finished it, just go back to it, add responsiveness to it, use the media queries, and kind of like test it on your browser. If you're happy with it and it looks nice, send it to me. Any questions you guys have about that or anything else? Okay, we'll close out. We went way above the time, so I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. I will around like 12:30. I'll send you messages on the Slack. I'll keep reminding you. So tomorrow, wake up, get your coffee, and get to work on the assignment, inshallah. So see you guys tomorrow. Okay, Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Alex, thank you.
You're welcome.